Given that SOPSI is now only a few weeks, I believe it's 5, how should an 18 X-ray physically show up to OSUT if crushing SFAS is their number one priority? I would hope that's your priority if you're showing up to OSUT as an X-ray. What times and numbers do you want to see prior to shipping to account for detraining that will potentially happen? Send it.
Yeah, so this may be a little bit of that paralysis by analysis. A lot of guys will not ship out or even refuse to talk to a recruiter until they reach some arbitrary performance threshold, some benchmark. And I fought that for a long time to say you must be able to do, run this, ruck that, whatever, and don't even consider it until you do that. Because what you'll get is that paralysis by analysis. Guys will say, "Oh, I'm not going to if I can't squat 3 times my body weight, then why even go?" Don't do that. You do not have to meet a set of arbitrary benchmarks before you go. I didn't have arbitrary benchmarks. You probably didn't. You went full send. However, because I got this same question so many times, I did develop some benchmarks, and I actually posted those on Reddit. And there's 2 different posts. One is performance benchmarks for pre-OSUT and performance benchmarks for pre-SFAS. And I looked it up this morning and I wrote them down. So pre-OSUT, 50 hand release push-ups, 10 pull-ups, 15-minute 2-mile, 40-minute 5-mile, 12-mile ruck in 3 hours of 35 pounds, and be able to bench, squat, and deadlift your body weight. Those are that's pretty achievable. If you're a reasonably fit young guy, you shouldn't have to struggle too much with any of those. Pre-SFAS, that they're a little bit higher. I got 75 hand release push-ups, 15 pull-ups, 12 to 13-minute 2-mile, 35-minute 5-mile, 2.5-mile 12-mile ruck with 55 pounds, bench press your body weight, squat 1.5 times your body weight, and deadlift 2 times your body weight. Now, I say all that, I caveat that again by saying if you don't meet one of those performance benchmarks, that is not cause to halt your progress. There's some great ways to get there, right? So let's talk about what the min standards are at selection. The min standards are 28 hand release push-ups. Brother, you ought to be able to do 28 hand release push-ups on a breath hold, 6 pull-ups, and a 15-12 2-mile run. My God, if you can't meet those standards, then you got no business even thinking about this. So clearly you want to be above those standards. I think those are the performance benchmarks, and I don't think they're that hard to get to. So Shut Up and Ruck is an 8-month program that is literally called From Sofa to Selection. It is specifically designed that as long as you're not morbidly obese, in 8 months you can get there. I think most guys are probably about 6 months away. You got to be cognizant of overtraining, right? So you got to do some injury prevention. Don't go all in day one. Probably shouldn't start rucking on day one. You should probably do some cardio based on that zone 2, build that out. Work on your. There's a lot of guys. It's actually interesting. I get messages a lot from guys down at Benning, some drill sergeants, and they're telling me that they're seeing an increase in new recruits that get shin splints just from standing in boots all day, just from being in formation. Like not the physical, like there are guys that are getting shin splints while they're in the 30th AG, waiting to go to basic training because they're not used to wearing boots. They're not wearing standing around all day. So there's some injury prevention stuff you should do. I have a whole chapter of that in Shut Up and Ruck. So you can work on that. All of that is very workable. It's very trainable. So I think there's some performance benchmarks. I want to caution guys, they're not hard and fast. Like I literally made them up. I provide justification for why. There's some documentation for that, but they're not hard and fast. I would tell guys, my mantra for this year is going to be start. Just start. Do it. Start doing it. Shut up and go. You don't need the perfect ruck. You don't need the perfect sock. You don't need the perfect boot. Just start going, and we'll build it. We'll build that aircraft in flight. We're more capable of doing that. So that's my long answer to the short question.
Yeah, my numbers are not very dissimilar. I also fully agree that just because you're not quite there yet doesn't necessarily mean. A lot of guys think that when they go to OSUT and they've heard that maybe at OSUT you're not going to really train all that much towards the end, you might lose some fitness. A lot of guys think that's like a death sentence, but even if you do, I've talked about this in a recent episode with John Hamilton. Even if you do lose some fitness at OSUT, it's not like you start SFAS day one right after you finish airborne school. You're going to have time to build it back up. And if you go with a good solid base of fitness, even if you do lose it, you're going to be able to rebuild it faster. And if you guys want to hear about some things that you can do while at OSUT to kind of maintain your fitness, even if you don't have a ton of access and stuff like that, I believe it's episode 141. You can check that out. It's on YouTube as well as on audio. We talk about that. But I think most of my numbers are the same, but I'll just read them off really quickly. So about a 40-minute 5 mile. This is, again, not pre-selection. This is before you go to SFAS or before you go to OSUT. About a 40-minute 5 mile or a little bit slower than that, but trending faster. So say, for example, 6 months ago, you were running a 53-minute 5 mile and now you're at like 42, but you've made all that progress in that amount of time. That's a really good sign. Even if you're a little bit slow right now, you can still get faster as you go. About 50 hand release push-ups. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. Could be a little under that. Hand release push-ups are something that you can absolutely build pretty quickly with some dedicated training. 8 pull-ups. That's honestly kind of generous. I think every male should be able to do 8 pull-ups just regardless. But at least if you're at 8, you can you can add a couple more reps before you go to selection, and you're going to be comfortably getting that 6. And he mentioned, Doc Walton mentioned the minimum standards for SFAS. If you're anywhere near those, I would probably push your date to the right, because, you know, if you're running a 15-12 or whatever the 2 mile was,
you ain't
on
gonna
day
make
one,
it.
yeah, best of luck on the other runs. And, you know, you're going to also be kind of poopy faced when you see almost everybody there beating you. But anyway, back on track. Able to ruck 15-minute miles for about 3 hours. So that's about a 3 hour, 12 mile ruck, give or take. Of course, doesn't have to be perfect, with about 45 pounds. Generally speaking, before you leave for OSUT, I don't really see a big reason to have much more than 45, 50 pounds in your ruck, maybe 55 if you're a freak and you know what you're doing, but not really all that necessary. And it's also not necessary to do a bunch of ruck running. If you can get to where you can ruck where you're just walking 15-minute miles, your future potential for being able to ruck, trot, or run, or shuffle, whatever it is, which you'll inevitably probably do during gate week, is great. So just because you're not every single ruck, you're not hitting those 12 to 13-minute mile pace that you talk about all the time. If you think about it like running, even if you are capable of running a 35-minute 5 mile or 7-minute miles, is every single run you do going to be at that pace? No, it's not. So rucking's kind of the same. A little different, of course, but, you know, don't feel like you have to just be smashing the standard every single training session. It's like trying to load the bar and max out every time you lift. It's just not really all that realistic. It's training versus actually getting tested on it. And then for the strength, I have always been hesitant to give out barbell strength numbers, but since they're so easy to standardize, as opposed to like you should be leg pressing this or hack squatting this or doing a machine chest press with this, I do like to kind of give barbell numbers, but also with a caveat. You should be capable of doing these lifts or an equivalent, something similar. For example, if you can't bench press what I have here, 1.25 times your body weight, but you can do a weighted dip with 4 plates around your waist, your pressing strength is strong enough. If you don't squat, you don't back squat, my number is 1.5 times your body weight, but you can do ass to grass, like calves to hamstrings, full depth hack squats with 6 plates on each side, your legs are strong enough. And then deadlift 1.75. Usually, because most people are stronger deadlifters than squatters, I put that number a little higher. That being said, a lot of people think that is a rule, and that's always the case. The deadlift is very subject to different anthropometries or body proportions, and some people just aren't built well for deadlifting. There are guys who are professional powerlifters that have crazy high squats. Their deadlift and their bench press are like actually pretty similar because they have really short, stocky arms. They got barrel chests, and they don't have great leverages for the deadlift. That doesn't mean they're weak. They're just not very built well for that lift. And me,
There's a ton of literature about femur length and how that correlates to strength. It's like, I mean, you can't control any of that. So you have to be smart about it.
Exactly. And like me, I'm a pretty lanky, slender individual. I've built a decent amount of muscle throughout my life. But even when I was super duper skinny, 6'1", 175 pounds, my bench press was like, I don't even want to tell people what my bench press was, but I was pulling 500 plus off the ground because I'm just built really well for deadlifting. So those are kind of the barbell numbers, but at the same time, if you have a lift that still uses those same movement patterns, the press, the pull, the squat, the hinge, overhead, vertical pulls and pushes, and those feel better on your joints and they still allow you to train consistently as opposed to only using a barbell. Nothing wrong with a barbell, of course. They're excellent lifts and you can build lots of strength. And I think most people, if not everyone, should learn how to master the barbell lifts. But if you've been lifting long enough and you have found a safety bar squat works better for you, or neutral grip bar bench press works better for you than a barbell bench press, or using the like some sort of rotating handles on pull-ups just feels better on your shoulders and elbows, but you can do 25 reps of them. Guess what? When you have to do your pull-up test on a straight bar, you're going to be okay. So don't get too caught up. Like you said, don't get too caught up around those exact lifting numbers. I wouldn't expect to gain, unless you're going into basic really, really weak, I wouldn't expect to gain a ton of strength and muscle. Some guys do because they're going in very weak and they're just open to making rapid gains. But if you can go in and you're pretty strong, and as we always kind of say, selection is endurance event with a strength component, not a strength event with a endurance component. As long as you're decently strong, you can carry your weight. I was a weak motherfucker when I went to selection by gym standards, but I was strong enough to carry stuff. I had the specific fitness requirements to be successful during team week, and I could walk forever with a ruck on, and I could run pretty fast, and I was good to go. So yeah, I think it's super important not to get too wrapped around the axle with these standards, but just kind of use them as a little bit of a guide, litmus test to direct your training and kind of plan out when you think it's going to be an appropriate time for you to leave. But at the same time, if you're a little bit short, there's going to be enough time for you to build it if you're consistent. And as soon as you get out of OSUT, guess what? For a lot of that time after OSUT, between day one of airborne school and day one of SOPSI, you're going to have time to either fuck off and do whatever, or actually go train and build your fitness and work on your weaknesses. The guys who use that time to build their weaknesses and get better are the guys who get better and they succeed. The guys who kind of just fuck off and whatever, no one's telling me to work out, so I'm not going to. Those guys don't fare very well.
And remember, progress is not linear. You're going to cycle 100%. Through it. So don't just think of your deconditioning period during OSUT as I'm going backwards. Think of it, I'm deloading, right? So I'm resting a little bit. I trained real hard before. Now I have different priorities for this next couple of months. I'll get back in there. Much easier to get refit than to get fit for the first time. So